Back in November, it was announced that Plarium had been sold by parent company Aristocrat to a Swedish-based gaming company called Modern Times Group. What you may not know is that this sale has not yet happened. That's because even though there is a binding agreement in place, it takes several months of regulatory processing before a sale of this type can be finalized. But if all goes to a plan, Plarium will change hands at some point in the first quarter of 2025. Now, back in November, I think a lot of people did reaction videos to this sale, and I held off because this is a complex situation, and I wanted to make sure that I understood the full extent of it. There are so many different moving parts. And so that's what I've done for the past several weeks. I've been sifting through media releases and internal financial documents from both companies in order to get the best picture I could of this situation. And I think I've finally done it. I've ferreted out all the puzzle pieces. It's been a really fascinating process peeling back the layers of this sale, and it's given me insights into how Plarium has operated over the past 6 years and how that may change moving forward and what that might mean to our experience in Raid Shadow Legends. So if you are interested in this sale or you want to hear my take on what to expect as Raid moves into the next phase of its lifespan, you're going to want to watch this video. I am Colred. This is Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. Let's get started. I think I have spent more hours researching and creating this video than any 3 other videos on my channel. And so I would greatly appreciate it if you would smash that like button for this one and consider if I've earned your subscription, because I know this isn't a gameplay video, but I do think it's an important topic to cover, and hopefully it will provide you with some insight about what the sale of Plarium may mean for the game of Raid Shadow Legends moving forward. As always, thank you so much for your support. Now let's get back to your video. When gamers hear about a sale of this type, I think there are 2 questions that we naturally ask. The first is, what does this mean about the health of the game that we love, right? Is Raid Shadow Legends dying? Is it still in a good place? If it were in a good place, why was it sold at all? And I think the second question is more about the developer, right? Is Plarium in trouble? Is it potentially going to be broken up for parts? And could Raid be sold off to another developer that may potentially massively change the game? And both of those questions are natural, and they're definitely the questions that I'm going to be trying to answer during the duration of this video. So we're going to start where I started, which is basically looking at a Google Trend graph of Raid Shadow Legends. So this graph basically shows the interest that the general population has in the topic Raid Shadow Legends in Google searches over the past 5 years. And this is basically a percentage graph. So if you look at this point right here, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, the first week of January 2023, that was the peak interest, the most Google searches at any point in the last 5 years. And so then every other date is compared to this rate of search, right? So everything else is a percentage of this 100%. So it doesn't give us the actual numbers, but I don't think that's a big deal. We want to see the relative trend here. So as you can see, in looking at this, in 2020, it was a relatively low period here. We got down to 42%. I think that's the low point on the entire graph. So only 42% of the interest that it was at its peak. But the peak is much more recent, right? This is in the first week of 2023. And then as you can see from there, it was a little bit of a downward 2023 and then an increase again in 2024. And it's gone down a little bit. And this feels fairly cyclical to me. But you'll notice here, we hit a low point the week of the sale. When Raid was sold, that was the least interest. And every day since then, pretty much, it has risen to a point where this week we're at 74%, which is above average for probably this 5-year graph. If you look at it, most of the time we're between 50% and 75%. So being above 75% is a really good place to be. So that means the general interest in the game is still there. But how does that translate into active players and, more importantly for the developer, money spent in game? So we got to look at some other numbers in order to figure that out. Aristocrat has 3 divisions of gaming operations. The first is called Aristocrat Gaming. This is focused on physical real-world casino games. So you go to a casino building and there's a table or an interactive game and you play it there with real-world money. As you can see here, the number that we really care about is profit. So the margin here is 56.1%. So 56.1% of their revenue is profit in this segment. That's extremely high. That's really profitable. And remember that Aristocrat is a casino company, so this is in line with their primary purpose for existence. Okay, so I want you to keep all of that in mind. Now we're going to go down and look at the second segment, which is Pixel United. Now, Pixel United is the mobile gaming division. Plarium is one company that is part of Pixel United. As you can see here, the profit is still pretty good here. The margin is 33%, so not as profitable as the real world casino games, but still profitable. Now, these companies, there are several companies, produce games that are broken down into three segments. The dark blue here is social casino, so that's in line with, again, the casino identity of Aristocrat. Then we have casual games, and we have RPG, which are the teal section. Now, what I think happened is, as a casino company, Aristocrat wanted to get into digital games for casino, basically casino games. They wanted to have mobile casino games. They wanted to have, online casino games. And so they acquired developers who made games in that arena, right? And as a result, they also acquired those developers' other games. I don't think they were looking to acquire role-playing games, but they did because some role-playing developers also developed casino games. That's what I think happened. But, of course, if you have an asset, you want to operate it as well as possible. So as you can see here, from 2020 to 2021, all three segments of games increased in terms of revenue. These are revenue numbers. So remember that this was when the pandemic really got rolling in 2020 and 2021, right? So people were at home, they had more free time, they couldn't go out and spend their money out of the house, so they just spent it on games. And as a result, all three segments grew. But going into 2022, you can see that the RPGs decreased just a tiny bit, about 0.5%, something like that. Casual games took a big hit. They actually dropped by 20% in terms of revenue, but social casino games continued to climb. And so clearly we're seeing the beginnings of the idea that social casino games are the most profitable and that casual games and RPGs are probably less profitable. Now, one thing I'm going to mention now, just so you know it, is that the margin for this segment is 33% here, but Plarium's actual profit margin is somewhere around 22 to 25%. So they perform well, but below this entire segment, right? Like, or below the average for the segment. And I think it's because the social casino performs above average, and the RPGs are probably about average, and the casual games are maybe below average. That's basically what we see in the market. So as a result, while Plarium is a valuable asset, you can see it is less profitable than the physical casino games, and it is less profitable than the social casino games here in the mobile division. Now, down here, we saw this paragraph a couple of years ago at the end of 2022, and this became a big talking point in the community. Role-playing games, strategy and action contributed $630 million US in bookings. That's just sales, a decrease of 0.4% compared to the prior year. This was mainly due to a decline in revenues from Raid Shadow Legends as this world-class title moves into profit mode. We saw that sentence and we about lost our minds because we had no idea what it meant, but it couldn't have meant anything good. And from that point till now, we would probably say the focus on aggressive monetization that we've seen over the last 2 years is basically a result of this idea of profit mode, right? So a shift in philosophy from building the player base to now milking the player base for all it's worth. What we didn't know at the time, but what we can see now looking back, is this is probably when the first ideas of selling Plarium came into being, right? The market is shrinking, and this segment is less profitable than other segments, so we may as well begin to prepare to sell this asset, right? Now, I want to show you one other thing from this year. Here you can see the daily active users for these 3 years. So from 2020 to 2021, there was a slight growth in the number of players per day. But then in 2022, there was a massive drop off. That being said, the players who were in game were spending more. Now, there's a whole lot here. I mean, they stopped doing business in Russia because of the war in Ukraine. So that shrank their user base quite a bit. And so that's one of the reasons for this massive drop in daily active users. But then they talk about like this focus on daily active user quality, which basically means big spenders, is reflected in the continued improvement in average bookings per daily active user, which just means how many dollars each user spent per day, which grew 11%. Now, it's actually kind of funny here. If you just did these numbers based on any income, like any revenue at all, the growth in spend per user is just basically based on the idea that, the people who left didn't spend as much, right? Like if you lose 1.3 million free to play players, I'm not saying you did, but if you lost only free to play players, all of your spenders remain. So you're still getting the same revenue, but you're now dividing that by fewer people. That means they're spending more money per person, not than they did the previous year, but just than the total segment did the previous year, if that makes sense. So they didn't actually do anything to grow this 11%. They actually lost money, but they just were trying to spin it for their investors because this is, right, like a yearly report for investors. So they're like, yeah, we're doing a great job. We're getting more money out of each of our No, you're not. You're actually not. You're getting about the same amount per user. It's just that you have, you've gotten rid of like the freeloaders like me. You got rid of the free to play players. Actually, it's just that you got rid of a lot of Russian players who on average probably spent less money per day than the Europeans and Americans, that played. So part of it's that. And then I also think as people started to go back to work more and more, right, the people who stayed invested in the game were the people who spent money in the game. If you were casual in Raid, or if you didn't spend money in Raid, it was easier to leave it behind when you started going back to work, right? But if you were a spender, even when you went back to work, you might say, well, I still want to keep playing this game because I invested $10,000 in it the last 2 years. So I think that's basically what's driving these numbers. Now, if we look at the report for 2023, I also want to do this. This is basically the same report here for Pixel United. You can see, again, the segment is shrinking. Pixel United is shrinking. It's lost, profit here. The margin's gotten worse. And again, if you look at the graphs, you can see that the social casino games, the blue, are still getting bigger. They're still growing even as the rest of this division shrinks. Quickly, what it says here is, in the RPG strategy and action genre, exiting March in 2022 impacted bookings compared to the prior year, as well as the maturing of Raid Shadow Legends. So clearly they're looking at Raid as an older game. It's maturing. I mean, you're always doing that. You're always maturing. But their language is indicative of a philosophy about Raid. This is an older game. Okay. Now, in addition, over here, they say RPG strategy and action contributed so many dollars, a decrease of 10.8% compared to the prior year. So they lost 10.8% revenue impacted by the exit from Russia, but sustained profitability in Raid Shadow Legends was supported by efficient user acquisition investment, as well as innovative marketing initiatives, including the animated YouTube series Raid Call of the Arbiter, which I admit was a pretty cool idea. So what they're basically saying here, sustained profitability in Raid. Raid is still profitable. It hasn't actually declined that much. And again, if we looked specifically at Plarium's numbers over the past several years, Raid is still growing. Plarium is still more profitable than they were the year before. So Raid, even though it's losing some of its player base, is not actually losing money. It's still profitable. And in fact, the profits are still growing even into 2023. Now, quick look here, as you can see, the trend continues with the loss of daily active users. They've gone down to 4.6 million. Again, another increase of 13%. But if you do the corresponding math, it's basically, again, more and more casual players are leaving as the pandemic winds down and the spenders are staying. And as a result, it looks like each person is spending more, but in reality, it's not. It's just you're dividing the pie by fewer people, so the slices are bigger. That's all that's happening there. So now we go to the 2024 one. So this is this current year. And again, you can see here, this is Aristocrat Gaming. Let me actually look. Here's Pixel United. So this year was a better year because there wasn't as much of a reduction. So there was still a reduction in the casual games. RPG and strategy games reduced a tiny bit, but you can see social casino games still increasing. So what we're seeing here is the margin got better. Why did the margin get better? Well, I think the margin got better because social casino games have the best margin in this segment, and they're now the largest portion of the segment by a significant way. So as casual games get smaller, they have the worst margin. RPG games have sort of the middle margin, and social casino games have the best margin. So I think all this shows is that social casino games are much more profitable, right? Now, if we look here at the RPG strategy and action section, in the role-playing games, Raid Shadow Legends continues to engage players and deliver a world-class performance. Raid is still doing well, even as the genre shrinks across the board, even as mobile games do less well. Raid is still doing well. Here we go. Despite this slight decline, the result benefited from both user acquisition optimization and popular new product features within Raid Shadow Legends, which delivered strong performance in the year. So basically, they've called out Raid Shadow Legends every year. It's the best performer in the RPG section, and it's still extremely profitable. The game leveraged successful IP partnerships and creative content to deliver impressive year-over-year growth and surpassed $2 billion in lifetime bookings. So it's actually gotten stronger year over year. It's still growing. Raid is still growing in terms of revenue, and it surpassed $2 billion in lifetime revenue. Remember that Aristocrat has owned Plarium, which means it's owned Raid for the entirety of Raid's existence. So all $2 billion was revenue for Aristocrat. Okay, and then finally, again, you can see yet a further shrinkage of the daily active users and a corresponding increase in the spending. So we're really getting down to it. A lot of casual players have left. The hardcore players remain. Most of them are spenders, or a large portion of them are spenders. And as a result, it looks like each one is spending more, but they're not. I mean, you can ask any spender, did you spend more money in 2024 than 2023? The answer is probably no for a lot of them. For some of you, it may be the other way around. I know there were more things to spend money on with Mythic Champions and Soul Stones and all that stuff. But anyway, so what do we take from all of this? Well, if we think about, we go back to the beginning, right? In 2017, Aristocrat bought Plarium for $500 million. It operated Plarium for 7 years. Just Raid Shadow Legends earned more than $2 billion in revenue. We know that at a profit margin of 22 to 25% for Plarium, they probably earned Aristocrat somewhere in the vicinity of $500 million of profit in those 7 years, maybe even more. And then Aristocrat gets to turn around and sell Plarium for $620 million, which is a profit of $120 million, with potentially up to $200 million to come. Any technical expertise that the developers at Plarium could have imparted to Aristocrat as a whole in order to optimize their other games, that's already been done, right? There's no additional value to be had there. And so when Aristocrat moved Raid Shadow Legends into profit mode, what they were basically trying to do was elevate the profit as high as possible to make Plarium an attractive acquisition target for some other company. That's all they were trying to do. Just get every single dollar out of every player that they could. Not grow the player base, not improve the player experience, but literally wring every last profit, like cent, out of the players so that they could sell Plarium for as high a price as possible. So for 3 years, we've seen this happening, and it's no surprise that it's happened. And MTG paid a good price for it. $620 million, could go up to $820 million. It's not likely to. We'll talk more about that as we go. But so did Aristocrat sell Plarium because they think that the company is not great? Yes, they did. They think the company's good, but not great because they have other divisions that make more money. So what they're going to do is they're going to sell this company, take the sale profit, the profit of the sale, they're going to invest it in the other areas that have higher margins, right? Plarium's got a 22% margin. Social casino games have a 36% margin. Physical casino games have a 56% margin. They're going to streamline their business, focus in on what's most profitable, and jettison everything that isn't as profitable. It makes complete sense from a business standpoint. And Aristocrat, from an investor standpoint, hit an absolute home run with Plarium. They made money hand over fist with this company, even in the sale. and the sale is going to fund further growth and further investment in more profitable areas. That's great. Okay, so yeah, Plarium's a good company, but it's not good enough for Aristocrat. That doesn't mean it's a bad company, and that doesn't mean Raid is in trouble, because now we have to look at the other half of the equation. Who is buying Plarium? Why? And what does that mean for Raid? Here we are on mtg.com, and now we're going to talk about the company that has purchased Plarium. This is Modern Times Group. As you can see, this is one of their about pages, the home of great games and fantastic gaming studios. Right here, they have a little blurb. We actually care about this blurb quite a bit. Welcome to MTG. We are an international mobile-first gaming group. That's important. Mobile-first gaming group that offers players all over the world a wide range of popular game franchises. Today, our portfolio covers a wide range of evergreen gaming franchises. That's the second thing we care about. Our games generate revenue through in-app purchases, advertising, and from third-party distribution platforms. So right now, there are three things that are massively important to the future of Plarium and Raid. The first is that this is not a casino company. It is a mobile-first gaming group. Their primary focus is mobile games. That's awesome. That's a huge shift from a company that's primary focus was casino games, right? Big change. The second change is wide range of evergreen gaming franchises. Raid Shadow Legends is viewed by MTG as an evergreen franchise. Evergreen means long life, right? Always green, always generating money. So Aristocrat viewed Raid as a maturing title, right? They were into profit mode. One, because they didn't think it had a long life to go, and two, because they were trying to sell it for as much as possible. But MTG is much less concerned with necessarily wringing out every single penny immediately, and much more interested in making sure that Raid is a healthy title for a very long time. And third, our games generate revenues through in-app purchases, advertising, and from third-party distribution platforms. Now, this is going to be really important because Raid is awesome at generating cash from in-app purchases and also advertising. And actually, third-party distribution platforms a little bit as well. We'll talk about that more. Not really third-party, I guess first-party distribution platform. So we're going to talk about more of this as we go. But I do want to actually break down a little bit more of their mission statement. It says here, our mission is to build an international gaming village where entrepreneurs can come together to enjoy a thriving ecosystem of tech and knowledge, enabling them to accelerate their business. So the idea here is to bring developers together to share in an ecosystem, right? Create better efficiency, better innovation for each of the game developers. That's a good thing. We work closely with founders and entrepreneurs and have a long-term philosophy to ensure we create value both for our shareholders and for MTG's gaming studios. So long-term philosophy, yet another reason, like we were talking about evergreen, right? To think that the approach that MTG is going to have to Raid is a long-term one. They're not trying to just use up this title and get every last dollar. They want it to be healthy and long-lasting so that it continues to be profitable for a long time. Now down here it says MTG has a solid foothold in the casual and mid-core gaming segment. Our strong track record of profitable growth with successful titles is built on excellence in user engagement, user acquisition, and innovation. Okay, so again, more sort of indications that they have a philosophy about how to create evergreen titles. User engagement, user acquisition, and innovation. If you think about the weaknesses of Plarium over the last few years, they originally had great user acquisition, but they had given that up, right? Their numbers decreased every year. They kept losing daily active users. So a focus on user acquisition would be good. That would be a nice change. Build the player base back up. User engagement is really important. They want people to be engaged. Now, there's a lot of user engagement with Raid, but I do think that one of the things that they could improve upon is creating like positive engagement, right? So can they not only increase the number of hours we spend in game, but like the quality of those hours that we do spend in game? And then finally, innovation, we'll talk about that, but I think they're going to approach this game as like we have to innovate a little bit in order to generate that evergreen product that we're hoping for. MTG sees strong potential in continuing to grow and diversify our gaming portfolio. Well, they just acquired Plarium, as well as through strategic mergers and acquisitions, where we can unlock value potential by leveraging our experience and know-how to improve and scale additional intellectual properties. One thing that I think Plarium has done a very poor job of is leveraging the world of Teleria, the world of Raid, right? They did one little animated series, but this world could be used in a lot of, you could do novels, you could do animated series, you could do, live action stuff. You could do, there's so many, you could have other games, you could have other forms of game based on this world. If you think about how like the World of Warcraft lore merged into whatever Heroes of the Storm or whatever, plus, like all these other things, like you have these other games that are based on those IPs. That's what Raid is lacking. So I think that MTG looks at Raid as not just one game, but an intellectual property that could launch a series of games and potentially other multimedia experiences. So right away, we see that MTG is looking at Raid and Plarium as a very different thing than how Aristocrat looked at them. But let's go ahead and look at the actual acquisition. So this is the internal press release or whatever of MTG about the sale of Plarium. So MTG has today signed an agreement with Aristocrat to acquire 100% of Plarium Global, the international studio behind the popular Squad Battler RPG Raid Shadow Legends. The wording of this is always awful. A highly successful evergreen cross-platform IP. That's important. Cross-platform. Remember we said the mobile first thing on this page, right? Mobile first doesn't mean mobile only. Most mobile games need to be cross-platform now to be highly successful. And Plarium Play is one of the things that makes Raid successful. Remember that when you have a direct-to-consumer platform like Plarium Play, nobody takes a cut of your revenue, right? When you buy as a player, when you buy from Plarium, like you buy something in Raid through Plarium Play, Plarium gets 100% of the revenue. If you buy through Google Play or you buy through, Apple, the Apple Store or whatever, like if you have downloaded through there and you play on those platforms, Google takes a cut. Apple takes a cut. I think it's like 30% too. So direct to consumer cross-platform, I don't know what you would call it, software, like apps. That's what you want for a mobile game. And Plarium does that very well. And we're going to see more of that as we go throughout this. Okay, so this acquisition provides scale with multiple avenues to deliver synergies, great, and adds a highly creative studio with a history of commercial success. Yes. It will also substantially improve MTG's already strong cash flow generation, and that's huge. I want to talk about that more. Okay, so the price is $620 million, of which $20 million doesn't happen until 2026. A couple of things. We have two additional considerations, $30 million here in 2025 and $170 million in 2028, based on revenue, like potential revenue achievements. So if they hit certain standards of revenue, it may be that Aristocrat will get more money. These are weird things. These are a little bit weird things because they have to be structured very specifically. Aristocrat basically is trying to hedge their bets. They're saying we don't want to sell something that then will increase in profitability. So if it does increase in profitability, you have to share some of that with us because we were the ones who developed. And MTG is saying, yeah, sure, we'll do that. But depending on how it's structured, they could selectively reduce the profitability of the company, right? So for instance, let's say if they make 300 million, they have to give half of it to Aristocrat. Well, what they could say is, rather than give 150 million to Aristocrat, which does not benefit us all, let's invest that 150 million into infrastructure, increase our servers, expand our offices, hire more people. And those are now business costs, and that reduces our profitability. And now we don't have to give any money to Plarium, to Aristocrat. Plus, we have now all these new assets to grow our company. So I don't know that Aristocrat is going to get any of this 200 million. So a lot of times when you saw like the articles posted in magazines and stuff, it said 820 million sold, Plarium sold for 820 million. We don't know that that's going to be the price. We know that the 620 million is locked in. It's going to be somewhere between 620 and 820, but likely it's going to be as close to 620 million as MTG can possibly make it. Okay. Now here's an interesting number. Plarium generated $613 million in revenues and 137 million in EBIT, which is a form of profitability. So basically, you're looking at 110 million in free cash flow. This is huge. Free cash flow is basically money that you can use to grow your business with, right? It's cash you have on hand that you can spend in basically any way you want. You don't even if you have a profitable business, you don't always necessarily have a lot of free cash flow. But free cash flow is necessary to grow. So in a way, remember that MTG, if you don't know, they took out a bunch of loans, $450 million loans, plus some cash and stock sales, I think, in order to finance this purchase of $600 million plus the extra stuff later on. But they're getting 110 million in free cash flow over the next calendar year, probably somewhere around there. And that means that they're not only financing with money that wasn't theirs, they didn't have to spend their own money to get this, but they're getting this cash flow that they didn't have before. And we're going to see the numbers more later on. So MTG will benefit from Plarium's tech and expertise in live ops, marketing, and monetization. So live ops is Plarium Play. Marketing is the advertising that Plarium's done, and you know that they're good at that. And monetization, which obviously they're very profitable, to drive commercial synergies and further improve the group's performance over the long run. So imagine this. Basically, what's going to happen is MTG has all of these 5 other game developers. They're adding Plarium to that group. Plarium becomes the 6th. Plarium can teach the other 5 game developers how to build platforms like Plarium Play in order to have a direct-to-consumer platform, right? In addition, their marketing expertise will help, right? And the fact that they're bigger than all of the other companies will help them learn how to scale up. All these things are benefits. So when you think about the profitability of Plarium as part of MTG, it's not all based on direct sales from Plarium's products. They don't have to just generate revenue from their own products. They're going to help MTG improve the profitability of the 5 other studios that they happen to own. Yeah, and here it is. Those are the financing. This is a little bit less important. Okay, the deal rationale. Now, this is important. The transformative acquisition of Plarium enables MTG to significantly increase its relevant scale and accelerate its strategic execution. So remember when we said that Aristocrat had a strategic plan and it meant streamlining towards casino games? Well, MTG has a strategic plan, and it means growing their stable of mobile developers that can synergistically help each other become more profitable. Creating a best-in-class platform to power future organic growth. That's talking about Plarium Play. The deal establishes the combined group as one of the world's leading operators of highly profitable and cash-generative mid-core games with strong and well-known titles, and strengthen MTG's already highly successful casual game portfolios through the addition of Merge Gardens. That's a Plarium game that's casual. This elevates and diversifies MTG's already deep and extensive portfolio with a unique set of global evergreen IPs. Remember that question that I said we're trying to answer with this whole video? What's Raid going to look like in the future? What does this sale mean for the health and longevity of the game? It means good things. A unique set of global evergreen IPs. MTG wants Raid to be successful for many more years. They have to at least realize their $620 million investment. And that means that Plarium needs to be healthy and Raid needs to be healthy. The acquisition is closely aligned with MTG's growth strategy and selective approach. Plarium will enable the group to accelerate its organic evolution through even stronger live ops, Plarium Play, and expands the group's new game pipeline because Plarium has new games in its pipeline. Plarium's proprietary tools and technology platform will further enhance MTG's commercial capabilities and operating model. Again, imagine all of the 5 other developers getting platforms like Plarium Play, direct-to-consumer platforms. Now, this is interesting. Plarium generated revenues of $613 million, representing a 1.2% year-over-year growth. So even though the segment was shrinking, Plarium still generated more revenue each year. In addition, Raid grew by 2.3% year over year for the same period. So Raid Shadow Legends outperformed the entire portfolio of Plarium. Plarium grew in revenue, Raid grew by more. So is Raid healthy? It looks like it. It looks like Raid is pretty healthy, at least from a revenue standpoint. Here we see the operating margin of 22%. So that is much lower than the 36% we saw from the social casino games and the physical casino games from Aristocrat. The company's healthy profitability is coupled with strong free cash flow generation. And you can see that. Now, why does this company say healthy profitability? Well, I'm going to show you something else. This is a message from the president and CEO on 2024 from MTG. MTG's outlook for 2024 is for reported full year sales growth to be within the range of 1 to 5%. Growth about 1 to 5%. So again, Plarium grew, what did it say? Plarium grew 1.2%. Okay, so that's in keeping with the rest of MTG. The group also expects its reported adjusted EBIT margin for the full year to be between 26 and 29%. So that's for the full group, between 26 and 29%. So Plarium at 22% is close to that. It's relatively profitable. It's a little bit less profitable than the group as a whole, which is actually kind of interesting. But if we go down, we're going to see some other things here. Basically, if you look at the size of Plarium, right? Plarium's revenue was greater than the revenue of all of MTG last year. And this is with a third of the daily active users. MTG had 6 million active users per day. Plarium had 1.9 million active users per day. And yet Plarium generated more revenue than MTG. MTG, however, was slightly more efficient. You can see their profit or profitability, EBIT, was better. So MTG is more efficient. Plarium has scaled better and is more profitable per active user. So what MTG is hoping to do is merge these two things in a synergistic relationship. If MTG can help Plarium become more efficient, they can potentially increase the profit margin of Plarium. In addition, they can potentially grow the active users, right? They want to turn it into that evergreen product. Remember, they've got 6 million active users. So they want to help Plarium grow their player base, and they want to make them more efficient. In the meantime, they want to take Plarium's expertise of generating more money per day per user and potentially make all of their other games, their other 6 million active users, more willing to spend money. So they're going to grow Plarium and make it more efficient, and they're going to use Plarium to make the rest of MTG more profitable. That is why MTG saw this company and said, this is a good acquisition for us. Remember when we said it was a good sale? Like that Aristocrat did everything right? Like they bought low, sold high, made a lot of profit, and then leveraged the sale to invest in more profitable areas of their business. MTG also wins from this, right? They double the size of their portfolio. They increase their cash flow generation, which is going to potentially finance further expansion, right? And in addition, they've got these synergies going on in terms of Plarium's direct-to-consumer platform, and then their understanding of how to grow player bases. Because if we have to admit something about Aristocrat, they did not know how to grow player base. They shrank it every year for the last 3 years, right? And that's because they don't know how to retain their players, but MTG does. Now, I do want to look at one other thing here, if I can find it, which is that there is another thing going on right here. Raid Shadow Legends is available on a cross-platform basis, and Plarium has recently started collaborating with Chinese developer NetEase to launch the game in China and in key Asian markets in the future. Raid is not currently in Asia very much. Asian players typically have to use, VPN in order to play because it's blocked in places like China. However, if they get permission through NetEase to launch the game in China, that is a huge additional market here. And I do want to show you just one thing. This is from Plarium's website. This is from their blog. And they say right here, premium games with in-app purchases do work. They're talking about China specifically. Understanding how locals prefer to game is also key to ensuring the success of Chinese video game releases. Mobile Chinese gamers are happier making in-app purchases to enhance their gameplay of freemium titles. Mobile Chinese gamers are happier making in-app purchases, meaning happier than non-Chinese gamers, right? They prefer to spend on their freemium titles more. Chinese casual gamers pay 50% more in-app than players elsewhere. So, Plarium has this market it hasn't tapped yet. It is a profitable market. It is a huge market. You're talking about a massive population, and it has yet to be tapped. And this is where that consideration with Aristocrat comes in. If MTG and Plarium can unlock the Chinese and Asian market in the next 3 years, their profits could soar. And that is why Aristocrat wants that consideration. They're like, hey, if you open up China, we haven't been able to do it, but if you open up China and you make another $1 billion on Raid next year, we want a piece of that. Maybe because we started the ball rolling. Like, Plarium's been trying to do this for a year and a half, and we were part of it. So if it does happen, we don't want you to take all the credit. And that's probably why. Now, if China doesn't open up, I think increased profitability is still on the table, right? But there is this massive potential in the Chinese market for Raid to make a ton of money. So that's something to just be aware of. Okay, so now that we've seen all of that, we want to go back to those first two questions. What does this sale mean for Raid, and what does it mean for Plarium? And I think it means basically all good things. If we think about MTG's business reasoning and philosophy for this purchase, they want to leverage the Raid IP, and they want to turn it into an evergreen title. What I think that means is we're going to see some investment into the game. And there are also going to be some other things that go on. So we should see healthy growth and innovation within the game and development. I also think that player engagement and the player experience will become more of a focus. The last year or two, Aristocrat's really been pushing profit, profit, profit. But I think MTG is going to have a different message, and they're going to push player-based growth, player retention, player experience. Let's keep our players happy. Let's make them love this IP because we want it to be an evergreen title. I also think we're going to see this IP exploited in new ways. We might get additional media focused around Raid Shadow Legends in the world of Teleria and the characters, maybe animated series or movies or books or something. We're going to see something in the next year, I think, in that avenue. And then finally, with the potential for the expansion of Raid into other markets, and this combination of sort of synergies with the MTG ecosystem, I think in both areas, we're going to see Plarium do well, right? Not just Raid, but I think Plarium in general, they're going to introduce new games. I think they're going to probably have a big title in the next year or two, maybe more. There's going to be a focus on new titles. And there's also going to be a focus on like optimizing those titles based on the ecosystem that MTG has in place. Make sure they're leveraging all of their assets to their full potential. So I think this is a good thing for Raid. I think it's a good thing for Plarium. I think it's a good thing for MTG. I think it's a good thing for us. So I know a lot of reactions to this a bit basically said, hey, this is going to be business as usual. I don't think that's true. Remember that this sale doesn't complete until that, review is done, right? There's regulatory review that has to be done. It should be done sometime in the first quarter. So hopefully before March, this sale will go through. And I think we will immediately begin to see some change in the direction of how Raid is operated and how Plarium operates Raid. Let me know what you think. Have I convinced you? Is this sale a good thing for Raid, or do you think it's going to be business as usual? And is there anything that you thought I missed? Anything that surprised you, or any insights that you have that you could share with the rest of the community? Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end of this one. Like I said before, I put a lot of time and effort into this one. So if you would, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks for hanging out. I have been Colred. I will see you in another video soon.